History is her story too. It is replete with black women who realized the importance of their voices, activists who carried the cause throughout history. Sojourner Truth, Coretta Scott King, Alice Walker, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, Faith Ringgold, and many more like Angela Davis, Dorothy Height, Carol Moseley Braun, Faye Wallerton, and Fannie Lou Hamer. Good morning. I'm Ed James, and this is Black Almanac. Today, I'd like to introduce you to three of these women. Marcella Howard, founder and executive director of In Our Own Voice. Dean Haywood leads Women with a Vision. And the mayor of the city of Sarasota, Attorney Shelley Freeland Eddy of the Freeland Law Group. Mayor Shelley, good to see you, as always.
Thank you. Good to be
And
here.
I should say in its full name, Mayor Shelley Freeland Eddy.
Yes, sir.
Of the Freeland Eddy Law Group.
Yes.
But you know, when you, and one of the reasons I wanted you to be with me today was a lot has been said recently about the role of the black female in election cycles. There's been a lot happening in Virginia and Alabama, and too often I think we decide either you're a professional or you a non-professional, and you may work in a community-based organization, and somehow that's different. But, and I use elections to talk about it because whether it was the beauty parlor with the folk talking to their clients about getting out to the election, or in a community-based organization like the NAACP or something, or professionals, maybe in your sorority meetings, talking to other ladies of letters. What do you say?
Well, I think if you look at history, women activists dating back to Fannie Lou Hamer and Shirley Chisholm and many of the sheroes of that time, it was the struggle that turned into a career for many of those women. It was the lack of access to the ballot, or it was the mistreatment in terms of housing or education or transportation that led into a public role. So I don't think that that's necessarily changed for women, and particularly women of color, that there might be a form of struggle or community-based issue that women find themselves in, and taking on that struggle on behalf of their community more times than not creates an avenue or service which can have the name of attorney or doctor or elected official.
Black attorneys, male and females, black doctors, male and females, had to set up their own medical association,
Yes.
or their own legal association, because they were not allowed to be a part of the American Medical Association.
Right.
So I know black doctors started the National Medical Association.
Correct.
And I believe attorneys did also
That's
in
correct.
that same way.
Yes.
So the struggle is not just class, but it's more color than class. The struggle has been. Would you say that's correct?
I think that it's both, and depending upon the time in history, it might have been predominantly more race than gender now, and sometimes it may still be a combination of the two. discrimination and prejudice took on both of those forms of gender and race. There was a systemic prejudice and racism for people of color to begin with. Women of color fell under that class of, we don't like African Americans or Hispanic Americans or Native Americans, and then women were another reason, unfortunately, for there to be a basis for discrimination. So I think that it was equal. I think that in some areas, particularly maybe 20 to 30 years ago in corporate America, and even today, that there are still some significant barriers that women of color face that other classes don't face. So I think they're both equally important. I don't necessarily know that one overrides the other, but that might be industry based that's different. I think definitely in tech careers out, in California, that women and women of color face significant discrimination in terms of the tech jobs and those types of things, and so that can translate, into other parts of what we do on a daily basis. Are they both critical? Do we deal with both? Yeah, we still do, yeah.
All of the women of color, particularly black women of color, who went into politics, who got into elected office, for the most part, were attorneys, the females.
Right.
But now, our elected officials are all of the above, whatever the above is.
Sure.
How far have we come?
I think that we have come far, but I also think that discrimination is more covert than overt. I think that it's more systemic. I think that it's more indoctrinated in principles, whether it's financial restrictions, whether it's redlining in business, whether it's in using the family to erase women from some opportunities in corporate America that might be amenable to particularly men that might have more of a flexible schedule and being able to integrate in some parts of corporate America. So I think that those things are still present. And also, being at the table doesn't always generate the integrity and respect that should be due. I mean, if you look at a case like Marian Wright Edelman in terms of, all of the barriers that she broke in terms of being the first woman to pass the bar in Mississippi and then going on to go to Yale and directing the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and then coming back to practice law, she was a trailblazer and opened up some doors, but that still left in the minds of those who were racist that she shouldn't be there. So it took litigation and it took the practice of law that broke down those barriers. And today we're able to walk through because of people like her that paved the way. And so most of the attorneys gave their service to the NAACP because that was their vehicle to be able to provide that there shouldn't be discrimination in places of employment and desegregation of the schools and making sure that there was systemic increases in opportunity for promotion and those things. But then when you still get to the table to be able to make decisions, it still takes an individual from a moral perspective to decide that I'm not going to treat you different because you look different from me. We always talk about whether or not you can legislate away morality and whether you can legislate treating you equal. And a law can only go so far in doing that.
In New Orleans, Louisiana, there's a lady, Dion Hayward, who heads a program, Women with a Vision.
Right.
Let's hear from her.
The offices that we rented in Mid-City, New Orleans, was broken into and torched and set on fire. And because of all of our supporters around the country, we were able to purchase what we are calling our little piece of blighted heaven. When you walk in, we want to have like a comfortable space with a television. We're going to have a large community meeting room where we can hold all our classes. Grassroots fundraising is what made this possible, but we need more. We need more to complete everything from electrical, plumbing, getting the place up and running.
So these are our plans for the new space, and we've been working with local architects here in New Orleans. We have, a shower available for folks that may need that, as well as a laundry room, which we're really excited about because a lot of what we do is just kind of providing things that people need on a daily basis.
Majority of the people we work with at Women with a Vision feel really uncomfortable entering any space for a service because of stigma. Stigma because you're a drug user, stigma because you're a sex worker, stigma because you're a trans person or homeless.
For us, it's really important to have control of a space that's safe for our clients to be in.
We'll have lights, a state-of-the-art alarm system, cameras to ensure our safety.
It's so sad somebody just actually take our space away. Why? Because we care for the people that nobody else don't care for. I'm getting emotional right now. A lot of them, they don't have money for psychiatrists and all that, so we their comfort zone. And then their safe haven just was took from them, and I know how they feel. Some of them I have to go meet at their houses. Some of them we meet in public areas. And I just feel so bad that I have to do it like that, but if that's what it takes to keep them knowing that somebody there for them, and then that's what I'll keep doing until we get this place up and running. I can't stress enough the depth that's needed for the Give Vision House running and all the people that it will support.
And this is why this space is so important.
Yeah.
Safe space is so important to all of us. And I become speechless every time I think about that grassroots organizations all over this country, student groups, neighborhood groups, just people did fundraisers and made this possible. If it wasn't for all of you, we wouldn't have this space.
If it wasn't for all of you, we wouldn't have this place. You're thinking about this, and she started after Katrina.
Right.
We come to a point, and as we think about it, that we went through a period, black folk, people of color, where we started separating our people. Community-based organizations are all right, but I don't like this one who's running it, so I won't help or I won't participate. But we have someone else with us today through the magic of TV who's an attorney, but she's always worked in community-based organizations. Let's look at that now and then we'll go on.
Okay.
So, when we first started writing this report, we were, it was prior to the November election. And of course, we were extremely optimistic about what we thought was going to happen. We had been working with a number of organizations in the collaborative All Above All to eliminate, hide restrictions. We thought we were well on our way to doing that. We had worked on women's health issues, on HIV prevention, and we thought we were really going to have something happen coming up. And then the election happened. And we are now 5 months into an administration that has made it very clear that they are opposed to voting rights, they are opposed to reproductive rights, they are opposed to an educational opportunity, workers' rights, environmental advances, that they literally plan to incarcerate as many people of color as they possibly can, according to what the new Justice Department's guidelines are. So we are now in a new reality, and that new reality is a reality of resistance. The report took a little bit of a scan as we started thinking about that, most of the report was already written, and then we went back and started to revise some stuff based on our new reality. There are 4 parts to this report. The first one is about writing our own narrative. We met in January of this year to really talk about strategies for the next several years, and one of the things we came up was that it was time for Black women to write their own narrative and to be very, very deliberate about it, intentional about it. And part of that was to examine our current political climate and really talk about what it meant, what we saw, what we thought was going to happen in terms of policy, what we thought we could affect, and what we knew we could not affect, but what kind of things our communities needed to have in place to really fight against the wave of repression and oppression that we saw coming. Our bodies, which is the second part of this report, examines some of those issues that we think are important to Black women and girls and to our reproductive health and well-being. Our lives looks at the intersections of reproductive justice. Most people think of reproductive justice as something that is just about the womb. It is not. It is also, reproductive justice very clearly looks at all of the intersections of our lives, of women of color's lives, and for our report of Black women's lives. So we also wanted to look at things like criminal justice reform. We wanted to look at some of the issues around housing, around violence against women, and numerous other issues that we thought impacted our lives on a daily basis. And then the last part of the report, our voices, is our agenda for action. Most people call it recommendations. We deliberately did not put in specific legislation. We wanted to make sure that that was open for each state to really look at and think about and come up with what that plan was. Part of the report also involved listening sessions that we did with Black women on the ground. We actually did listening sessions in 6 cities, and the report has write-ups of those listening sessions on what people said, what people were thinking, how people felt about the issues in their states. This report lays out a reproductive justice worldview. Reproductive justice is the human right to control our bodies, our sexuality, our gender, our work, and our reproduction. This right can only be achieved when all women and girls have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about our bodies, our families, and our communities. Because the reproductive justice framework encompasses bodily integrity and autonomy, our use of Black women in the report includes cis women, femmes, trans, binary, and gender nonconforming people. So it is not exclusive to just women who identify themselves as women because of the parts they were born with.
What we just heard from Ms. Howell, her group is called Women with a Vision.
Right.
And they write books, they do many things. What do you say?
I think that what tied those two activists together was they both took control of their circumstances and demanded that action happen. One was community-based on a local level, and the other was a national platform that gave communities a working document to be able to demand better in housing and healthcare and access to jobs and services. Looking at the sheroes that we've talked about, another one who really has not really gotten the recognition that I think she deserves from a person of color's perspective is the Me Too movement. We've seen all of the implications of those that have been accused of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and it's been largely in the entertainment industry, and we've seen it in the news. But many folks don't know that the founder of the Me Too movement was a Black woman, Tanara Burke, and this movement started over 10 years ago because she was a victim of sexual assault, and she wanted to create a platform that allowed other women of color to be able to come up and be empowered under the law and in their communities when these types of crimes happen. And for 10 years, she's been advocating in her neck of the woods, and it's grown globally, to be able to say, I too can identify with your victimization, but I too am a place where we can demand better and demand accountability. And what hasn't been focused on here recently, because the victims have not looked like us, is what is the impact to women of color who have experienced sexual harassment and sexual assault. And the statistics are staggering from an employment perspective. One, because 1 of 4 don't report. And so the stats are skewed because the folks who are victims are afraid to come forward.
Are the numbers higher within the black community?
They're higher among black women in terms of victimization, but they're still skewed because more black women don't report. And the reason that they don't report, aside from retaliation, is the significance of economic impact, because in many households, women are the sole breadwinner. So there is a more disparate economic impact for a female who might be laid off, let go, discharged, even though she was the victim, because there is no financial support in many cases in the home to address the matter from a legal perspective. So there's an underreporting that happens, but also because of the fact that most women do not hold supervisory positions when they report, they are less likely to be believed, and that percentage is magnified among women of color. Then when you flip over to the EEOC side, which is the federal organization that reviews complaints of discrimination, over half of the complaints that are received relating to sexual harassment in the workplace are denied, dismissed, rejected. Half of those are women of color who have filed complaints. So if you look at, am I going to prevail, it's a gloom picture.
And many of those women, when you're talking EEOC, are folk who work in government.
Absolutely. They've been there for 15 to 20 years. There is a lower likelihood of establishing a new career. There is a dependency upon a retirement or a pension at the end of it, and they necessarily don't have the skills to start over, if they have to walk away from employment, even though they're the victim.
One of the things I think it's very, very important that we make very clear here today is that women have always led. Black Lives Matter,
Absolutely.
for example. It wasn't young folk or children, it was 2 black women who started that.
Right. Yep.
And something that males, black males in particular, have to get over and understand that we're all in it together.
Yes. Yes.
And if the woman says it happens and she starts something, you need to support her, not to say, they're trying to do a man's job. When we think of the civil rights movement, the Big Four, going back, Martin Luther King, the head of the National Urban League,
Yes.
and the NAACP. Dorothy Height
Absolutely.
was never brought to the table when they met with the president or the others. But they always went back, and Dorothy, this is what they're saying, what do you say?
Right. Right.
I think it's important that folk who are professional by occupation, such as you and others, have a real obligation to let the young girls understand that women have been leaders in our community for these many years.
Right. And the other part too is that, when we acknowledge that we're all in this together, then I am a link in the chain, and if my role on the chain is to do the work that might not be seen and I'm more concerned about the cause, then that is my role, and I don't have to be ashamed or upset about that. And so it's not about us trying to upstage each other. It's about we fit and function in the place where we are called. And if we do certain things better and we all respect and appreciate one another, then the role doesn't get diminished. Not to say that I have to be out front in order to get praise, but we all work together to get the job done. And I think sometimes the way that the media glamorizes the person who's out front, it deminimizes the purpose and the skill of the person that might be providing that support. So a young person may think that this role is not worth it because I don't get to be seen, because we praise the person who's seen, but we don't give support and acknowledgement and affirmation to the folks that are in the team behind the scenes that are getting the work done. And that's a function as a community that we need to address. We can't expect others to make sure that we affirm our own, because otherwise we look to their standard as opposed to saying, I know who I am, I know what I contribute, and I'm worthy whether you clap for me or not.
And the media is the worst place to look for someone to give you to feel that if the media doesn't say the right things about you,
Sure.
that you're nobody.
But the other part of that too is that we have the right to tell our own story, and there are plenty of producers and television networks and folks, and we know all of the stories of the women in television that have done well, but they have decided that I have a story, I need to help tell our story. So I'm going to put myself in a position where I can control the content and control the delivery, so that when you turn on that TV, little girl of color, you see someone who looks like you that gives you something to aspire to. So there's value on both sides of it.
Almost over the years at this station, there have always been women of color who've been producers. You never see the producer. You don't know the producer is there. But you only see the person who's in front of the TV.
Right.
And what we have to do is begin to collectively tell the story.
Yes.
Well, Mayor Eddie, Attorney Eddie, thank you so much for stopping by, and we appreciate you, and we appreciate the role that you do
Thank you.
in this community. And as always, have a great day, Suncoast.
We have two special announcements. The Mountaintop by the West Coast Black Theater Troupe opened up to a sold-out audience on January 10th. Will run through February 18th, 8 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday, and 2 p.m. matinees Saturday and Sunday. Adults, $42. Students and military, $20. Call 941-366-1505 for details. In addition, the West Coast Black Theater Troupe will be celebrating the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Monday, January 15th, 7 through 9 p.m. at Booker High School. Reserved seats, $10. Premium tables at $35. Call 941-366-1505 for details.